Welcome in everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Good morning. It's Saturday morning as we come to you. We've got a lot to cover today. Really want to get into some talking points. I've been talking the last few episodes about the roster, how I like to make up the roster 1 through 9, talking about positional versatility, some of the things. Today I'm going to actually jump into my initial projected starting five and how some rotations might look and why I'd arrived at that. I was going to lead with that actually after the introduction, but there was college basketball report tweeted out. Uh, who do we got there? Ghosted Grave. All right, got the fist pound. Morning to everybody. By the way, go hit subscribe, like, share, all that stuff. Let's go ahead and ask for that on the front end. But I was going to lead with the starting group and get into the roster a little bit more in terms of what some rotations and different playing groupings might look like. And then getting in talking about a little bit more about filling out the final two or three players, as Calipari's kind of described it vaguely, and some options there. And then I was going to jump in. We're still going to jump into the class of 2025 and 26. A lot of stuff happening right now and coming up in terms of visits and some of the big time camps in June. Some of them already played out. And then we'll talk at the end about a little Pro Hog. So this is going to be a jam-packed segment. I'm in no hurry. I hope unfortunately, there's no Diamond Hogs baseball right now. So we got time. We got time to sit down together and go through it and maybe really jump into some stuff. I was a little bit, I don't know if I was surprised, but I saw College Basketball Report tweeted out top 50 was a graphic with its, I guess, idea of what a top 50 Division I coaching list looks like, ranking 1 through 50 going into the 2024-25 season. All right. And so you had a list of coaches there. To no surprise, multiple SEC coaches. I was a little bit surprised about a few things, but John Calipari came in ranked number 18th, which put him fourth in the pecking order among SEC coaches. You had Nate Oats at 9, Chris Beard at 10, Bruce Pearl at 14. Eric Musselman, the former Arkansas Razorbacks head coach, EPM, Eric Patrick Musselman, came in at number 16. So Cal checks in at number 18. You got Rick Barnes one spot below him at 19. And so there were some other SEC coaches as you look down. Todd Golden at Florida, Chris Jans. You had some names in there. But I thought it was interesting. When you look at the list, number 1, of course, was Dan Hurley. Bill Self was second. Kelvin Sampson was third, and I think that's about right. He's a top 3 coach, man. He has been par excellence throughout his career as a head coach. Did some time, when I say time, when he had a show cause in the NBA, learning even more tricks of the trade, but in a good way. But one of the best out there. But some of the list, Tom Izzo's ranked, I think, 11th or somewhere. But I guess if you were looking at postseason results, you could argue that this ranking for Calipari might be fair. In the last handful of years, you're thinking, well, what is the recency bias? What has he done lately to earn that kind of ranking? He's still one of the top recruiters out there. That puts him in the top 3 to 5 for sure in terms of recent recruiting. And then you say, well, what do those results look like? The results have been pretty good for the most part in the regular season. Even the best coaches have down years, but he's had really good regular seasons. It's just been postseason these last handful of years. And so, 18th, I just want to throw that out there and go through it a little bit. Any chance of getting McNeely from Yukon? Let's pump the brakes. I'm getting there. Man, I hope so. I hope Dan Hurley's got to leave, obviously. Dan Hurley's got to take that Lakers job. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll get into that. We're going to get there. We're going to, I don't want to juggle around the talking points, so it may be a bit later before we get there. But I do think, just as a teaser on that question, thank you for the question, by the way, I do think it's one of those things where I do think Arkansas would be in play. I think, does the player decide to wait it out and see who Yukon hires as a replacement? Does he go ahead and start taking visits and reopening options while that might be pending? How quickly does Yukon make a change there? I mean, this seemed all kind of abrupt. It doesn't seem like this was a slow-moving train. It's kind of a bullet train all of a sudden. Dan Hurley let the team know that he's in talks with the Lakers. He's traveling out for the weekend to L.A. I mean, you're talking Connecticut to L.A., and so he's going to go through that process of exploring that option. That's who the Lakers have targeted. LeBron James loves the idea. Bronny James in the draft. Don't get me started on that. That takes us down a whole nother road, which we know business has always been selling tickets, marketing, all that's always been a part of sports, more and more so over the years, especially really when you started going back to the 80s and 90s in basketball when the sport really blew up. But some things to me are well, I'm going to say it, maybe a little bit of a slap in the face of the integrity of the game. Bronny James is a first round draft pick, like I'm a first round draft pick. Probably would actually make more sense to draft him over me, but I think it'd make a lot more sense to take other guys. We'll see if he's even a first rounder, what gets worked out. I don't know. I'll stop there for now on that. But the point is, if Hurley takes that job, yeah, I think a Liam McNeely might be. So we're going to get into all that. We're going to go through. I'm going to go through players that I identified and tweeted about yesterday. Right before noon, I put out a list of some of the players Yukon has, and I kind of broke it down in little categories. Not real in depth. It was a tweet, but I gave you. There was some stuff in there we're going to talk about who might be poachable. Liam McNeely to me is the number one name on there on someone that might be realistically poachable. We're going to get back to that. But going back to these head coach rankings, I want to see some of the comments. What do you think? Calipari ranked at 18th. I think if we were looking at names based on an all-time active coaches based on all-time results, it's a no doubt. He's top 2, 3. I mean, you could Izzo's up there, Bill Self. I mean, Calipari's in that grouping. When you really bring it down to what he's done and how he innovated the landscape of recruiting in college basketball, if you take all of that and sort of that rock star persona, he to me he's still the biggest name in college basketball because of all that, and arguably number one in terms of active coaches. Only Coach K, who was a recent active coach, probably would trump him in that sense when you take overall. And of course, Bill Self, Tom Izzo, I mean, they're right up there. But this is talking about going into next year, which I think is interesting. Nate Oates, then at ninth, seems a little bit odd to me. If you're going off recency, this guy's been winning SEC titles. He got Bama to the first ever Final Four just last year, and it has arguably the top squad coming into it. Bama gave Yukon. You look at Yukon's track record in 2 NCAA tournaments, going 6-0 and then 6-0. They weren't just beating teams, but by an average of 21 plus points. And even though the Huskies had a double-digit win technically over Bama in the end, that game was back and forth, anybody's ball game going down the final stretch inside those final 4 minutes. And Bama didn't get it done. I'm not trying to sing the praises of Alabama by any sense in terms of a basketball program. But all of a sudden, it seems a little interesting to me. You could pick apart any rankings. But I would say Nate Oates probably deserves better than ninth. Chris Beard, what has he done recently? He's moved around a little bit. We know that. We know he's a hell of a coach. And I'm not dogging him. I mean, top 10 seems fair to me when you look at what he did, going back a few years. I don't know how has it been a handful of years at Texas Tech getting to a national title game. We know he is a hell of a coach. But, having those guys one spot apart based on recent results seems a little bit odd. Bruce Pearl, 14th. Rick Barnes, 19th. Mark Pope, I didn't mention his name, the new Kentucky coach out of BYU, ranked 23rd. So anyway, those are kind of fun things to talk about. Eric Patrick Melsman, 16th. So a top 20 coach. I don't think any Arkansas fan would argue against that, going back to those 3 consecutive years of Elite 8, Sweet 16. In fact, I would argue that Muss was a top 10 coach and had Arkansas positioned in a 5 to 10 range in terms of overall programs in college basketball. I feel like, so I think 16 based on what happened last year, and kind of Arkansas started to fade, even though they had a Sweet 16 season, that 8-10, 10th place finish in league play, buttressed up against the kind of season Arkansas had last year overall and in league play. Kind of makes sense. So we're not going to talk too much about Eric Melsman today, but I just thought these rankings were interesting. Kind of want to see some of the comments. I'm going to try to actually do better today. I've got these ready to go. They need to be cleaned off a little bit. All right. Once again, thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm going to move on now. We'll get away from these coaching rankings. I'd say, just to kind of put a button on that, I think Calipari's probably not getting a fair shake there based on, what he's done at Kentucky, even in recent years, regular season, how it looks on the national landscape. I guess NCAA tournament knocking him outside the top 10, there's a fair argument there. But all the way down to 18th, I don't know. I would still probably have him in the top 10. And I would say that even if he wasn't Arkansas's coach. Looking at these rankings, I have some disagreements with some of it. But I would probably still have Calipari in the top 10. No worse than 10th. All right, let's move on. There's some really good coaches out there, by the way. Kevin, I hate Nate Oats, and I can't wait till he falls. Well, that's spoken like a true Arkansas Razorback fan. That's the mindset. That's the mindset. I can't give everything to you folks. I have to be a little bit careful and respectful, but I need you to bring it in terms of showing your true Razorback colors. I expect to see comments like that. Look, fans want that kind of thing, but if we take a step back and look at it, you got to give him his flowers, or however you want to phrase it. The guy's been a strong winner at Bama, and it's not been an isolated incident. Haven't had great runs in the NCAA tournament until last year, but he's got a Sweet 16 or a couple of them, and now a Final Four on top of that. And then has won a couple of league titles. I think he's won a postseason tournament, maybe. Man, I don't, I'm not memorizing Bama's success either by any stretch, but there's enough going on there to say, okay. All right, so moving along. And I mean, that was the top-ranked SEC coach, by the way, at 9th. And the SEC is arguably, I mean, if you think the Big 12 is the best league in college basketball now, and usually typically kind of is, SEC's not far behind, and so seems a little bit interesting there to me. All right, starting 5. I'm going to get into this. I've talked about it in other platforms. I don't know that I've actually gone through starting 5 on HogvilleNET YouTube Live, but we're going to do that right now, almost 12 minutes in. And I'm going to start with the two guys who I think are going to be the anchor. They're centerpieces going into this thing for your program. Guys with deep runs and NCAA tournament experience, postseason accolades in terms of individual guys, regular season accolades. And then, when I really look at not just production and efficiency and impact, but how it makes sense to me why they're here. Why did Calipari single these guys out? Yeah, he goes after the top level guys. But Nelly Davis at the 2 and Jonas Adu at the 5 is about as good as it gets coming out of the portal. All right, coming out of the portal, and these guys to me are what you build around. Everything else to me falls behind what these guys do. Now we'll see how it plays out, but just looking at it on paper, last year we were talking about what Eric Musselman did with a roster build, looked like a potential final weekend kind of team. I laugh at it now. So you never know. And we know, again, we just talked about Calipari's postseason stuff, but most of those teams were really good. Remember the COVID year, Kentucky won the SEC regular season. Didn't have a postseason. Had another team that bumped along when Arkansas went to its first Elite Eight. But for the most part, year in and year out, even in this rough stretch of NCAA tournament runs, his teams have been really good in the regular season and had guys going on in the NBA. So I look at Nelly Davis and Jonas Adu at the 2 and 5. They're my mainstays. They're my day one starter types. They're my no doubt, no brainer guys in that starting 5. So, I always kind of pick guys like that. Even though Musselman was not a big freshman guy, when Moses Moody came on, not just because, he was already projected as a one and done and a back end first round pick by mock drafts before he ever stepped on a basketball court, but because at 6'6" and the qualities he brought to the floor and his maturity at his age, I penciled him in as a day one starter because, first of all, Arkansas didn't have a lot of depth or other answers at the wing. They just didn't on that roster. And so I thought, so every year usually I pick out 1 or 2 guys I think are day one starters. Under Calipari, I'm identifying these 2. It seems easy, right? Duh. Those guys. All right. So when I'm looking at a starting 5, I wanted to start what I consider the building blocks. Davis is a volume scorer. He's efficient. He's a big time rebounder at 6'4". This is a guy that could arguably lead your team in rebounds this coming season. I'm not predicting that, but it's a possibility. That's how good Nelly Davis is. We'll see. Calipari's team last year at Kentucky, I don't want to compare everything to what he's done recently, but they weren't so good defensively. But I think Nelly Davis is a guy that can help you turn that trend. We thought the same thing about Tremont Mark coming in from Houston last year. So I'm going to be careful and not say that it will happen, but I'm saying it potentially could happen on defense with Nelly Davis. I think, the rebounding, the ability to score on a high volume level. And then Jonas Adu, a rim protector, all SEC. I mean, going back to Nelly Davis real quick, co-player of the year in a really good American Athletic Conference. I was shocked that he didn't even get honorable mention All-American, but helped lead Florida Atlantic of all programs. Good program, but no one saw a Final Four in the crystal ball. He was a driving force on that team, had a huge NCAA tournament. All of his numbers were up effectively from what he did in the regular season as a junior. And then last year led that team, putting up all kinds of great stats and helping that team get back to the NCAA tournament. Didn't one and done in the NCAA tournament, but still, you look at this guy, and then you look at Jonas Adu, all SEC defensive team, all SEC second team, a guy that really emerged in his third season at Tennessee. I don't think anybody saw that coming, but when you really watched him, his versatility as a defender, his ability to get out of his area, to block shots, alter shots, get rebounds, play above a defense in a half-court setting and finish off lob passes, the creativity of others. He's an opportunistic scorer. He can knock down a 12 to 14-footer. He'll take it if you leave him open. But the more you put around him and the more talent you put around him and capable guys, and if your offense has some kind of structure that makes sense, he's one of those guys that you can't always account for. And that's a shame because he can hurt you. And so you like guys like that. When you look at him last year and his stats, they're a little bit misleading because he only played 25, 26 minutes a game. We'll see if Calipari with the other frontline pieces inches him up closer to 30, or does he like him and his value in a 25 to 28 minute range and keep him there? Big Z, we're going to talk about him in a little bit, not as part of the starting five. So we're getting to the starting five. I'm starting off with individual players as we go and what I see as the centerpieces and the guys that you build around. But Adu is one of those guys where he is such a great teammate in terms of he's not demanding the ball. He's not a guy that if he's not scoring, he's pouting and not giving you the other stuff. He's plugged in, man. I saw that all year last year. I certainly saw it in Bud Walton when he went off for 23 and 12, and none of Arkansas's frontline players could deal with him. I mean, it was the Bud Walton Arena and Nolan Richardson court was his oyster that day, and it was a blowout win, 29-point win for the Vols. We know what Arkansas' season looked like last year, and some of those games happened. But you understood, too, why Tennessee, in a very good SEC, won that league outright, and Jonas Adu was a big part of that. So you've got a guy that helped the team also get to an Elite Eight. Now, no player's perfect. No player's perfect. Adu sometimes struggles against physicality. I've seen that. Zach Edey, I've watched that matchup twice. I watched Tennessee and Purdue play in Maui early in non-conference play. And Purdue got the best of it. We saw it again in the Elite Eight. And, not every player's perfect, and they do struggle with that kind of size guy with skill and all that. But that guy was a freak on the college level. There aren't many of those, or any of those, really. Maybe one or two guys that could really that would have really impacted Adu. Other than that, again, there were other matchups that he didn't always rise up to, but for the most part, he did. And you can't make all SEC on both levels, defensive team and the second team, unless you're having a big impact on a really good team. So the hope now is that you build another good team, other really good pieces around him. Remember, Dalton Connect, who's going to be a lottery pick. I can't pronounce his last name. Last year for Tennessee, All-American, Player of the Year, whatever you want to describe him as. But a guy like Adu helps guys like that. Maybe Adu and Nelly Davis are a perfect backcourt frontline combo, score, guy that can do a lot, check a lot of boxes, and then the rim protector, the back end help, the guy that's going to get out and transition and make a defense pay for worrying about other guys in both half court and transition, playing over defense, altering shots. So I've said all of that, but to me, those are your two guys that matter the most. All right, we're getting close to 20 minutes here. We're still not through the starting five. We've talked about other stuff. The next two names I'm going to mention are interesting to me because I look at Calipari and he always, if he can, likes to stack his lineups with length, height, and athleticism, and it's really played big hands in his teams being dominant on the glass, including offensive glass, and getting out in transition and just out-manning people. And so when I look at the 4 and the 3, I'm going Trevor Brazile at the 4 and Adu Thero, who's a 3-4. Here's a guy that's intriguing to me. Brazil was projected in some first round, even some lottery projections before the season he had, and still dealing with injuries. We know he just was the ninth commitment, the last guy on board just a few days ago. And then Adu Thero, who, despite not having huge production in terms of what Kentucky's had on the court in his 2 seasons there prior to coming to Arkansas, but is still projected based on measurables, his potential. I mean, he had a double double last year against Kansas, but a guy that's projected as a first round pick as soon as 2025. So you've got two potential NBA first round guys that I haven't even that I'm just now starting to talk about. I named the all league, all world, whatever you want to call them, in Nelly Davis and Jonas Adu. But you've got two potential first round guys at some point, legitimately, who bring that size, length, athleticism, and other things that are kind of off the charts physically and athletically in Brazil and Adu Thero. So now what do you have? When you start talking about 3 through 5, you're talking 6'8", 6'10", and 6'11". That looks like some of the front line, wing through 5 that Calipari's put on the court in the past at Kentucky. Going out and getting guys like this, can they play? Well, Adu Thero to me can play. When I watch him, he is a very versatile defender, can switch off, can handle guards, ones, twos, threes, can defend the 4 if needed in different kinds of lineup and play because he's a 3-4 combo. I view him as that. He's a sturdy 6'8" on top of being kind of a freak athlete. And he's a guy that needs to elevate his three-point shooting. If you're going to play on the wings, I think that's important. And I think he's a guy that can do it in low volume, around 32%, I believe, last year at Kentucky. So keep an eye on his progression as a shooter and a guy that can help you stretch the floor, because I don't know how much, I think he's going to oscillate some from helping at the 4 and play on the wing. But I think initially he starts off at the 3 spot with Brazil at your 4. And so to me, I feel more confident about that grouping in your starting lineup. The next one I would say who gets the nod because of experience and because of his recruitment with Calipari and ties with Calipari, Kenny Payne. The first nod at the 1 goes to DJ Wagner. And this is the one position I think Boogie Fland, the incoming freshman McDonald All-American 5-star. This may be a 1A type of thing where it doesn't matter who starts. I think both guys are going to have starter value and starter type roles, DJ Wagner and Boogie Fland. That's my vision for that. And both guys bring different dynamics. There will be a change of pace, not in terms of size, 6'2", 6'3"-ish, but in terms of what they do and how they do it. I think Wagner's another guy, when we're talking about perimeter shooting, obviously needs to get better there. That was a if you want to call out a weakness. Now, he was dealing with that high ankle sprain. His numbers were better before he dealt with that. He certainly looked good shooting the 3 against Arkansas in Lexington at Rupp Arena in March. 4 out of 5 from distance, 19 points. So a guy that we keep an eye on, but I think he gets the initial nod. I think so my starting lineup now, going back through it: Nelly Davis, Jonas Adu, Trevor Brazile, Adu Thero, DJ Wagner. I talked about some things that Thero needs to work on. For Trevor Brazile, you want to see him be a more consistent rebounder. In his 35 games spanning 2 seasons at Arkansas, some really big games, some really big performances, but a lot of also head scratching stuff in terms of him playing some matador defense, flat-footed ball watching, not putting up a resistance when guys challenge him mano a mano. But then he'll have those games where he goes out and grabs 10, 11, 12 rebounds, scores 14, 18, but somewhere in that range, knocking up double doubles, and he's look like a force at times. He'll block some shots. He's one of those guys that gets out of his area to kind of weak side block shots. He's not really, again, those mano-a-mano situations, even though he'll block some there, most of those he's not necessarily winning. So you want to see him get a little tougher, stronger. You hope that the confidence in his knee is at a point, because I thought he played his best basketball of his career in those first 8 games before injury. So I factor that into what we saw last year, even though some of those tendencies I did see in those first 8 games as a Hog 2 years ago. But a guy that I think you want to see the rebounding numbers go up. You want to see him be a little bit more sturdy and defiant as a defender around the basket. And I mentioned Jonas Adu and his struggles sometimes with physicality or bigger guys. There's just not going to be a whole lot of that, but he's not the most physical guy in the world. So you'd say the same about Trevor Brazile. So you're getting some question marks already And I'm going to go through weaknesses later. I'm hinting to them now. But Trevor Brazile, you'd like to see him be a little bit more involved offensively. Show some confidence. Bring those skills that he's got. You know, he when you watch him and when the ball moves, a lot of times when the ball would find him wide open, he's very methodical. He takes his time. Sometimes I thought his confidence wasn't there to take a shot. Other times I thought he made the wrong decisions, didn't take the shot that was there, and tried to force things at times. And then there were other times where I felt like he wasn't being not only active enough, but aggressive and confident in what he brings to the table. And again, you go back to a knee. Some of those things can factor into that on both sides of the ball, defensively especially. But there, all right, DJ Wagner to me, I look at him. I already like the fact that as a true freshman, we can talk about the injury. We could talk about the lack of production or efficiency shooting from three. But 10 points per game, nearly 3.5 assists, a better than 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. I've said that so many times because those things matter. Those things matter. He's already proven that he wasn't just a second shelf, second tier type of player. Remember, his backcourt was loaded with multiple draft picks. Some are going to maybe 2 or 3 go in the lottery. At least a couple are projected, I think, or close to it. But you're going to have several guys from that backcourt going first round for sure. So that's important to remember too. What company was he keeping in Kentucky's backcourt? That impacts things as well. And when you're playing from behind after a high ankle sprain, that that shuffles thing. I'm not trying to make excuses for him. I'm saying those are valid things to talk about. So I like the starting five. I go back now to the 6-man candidates. I said Boogie Fland. I've compared some of the craft he's got and some of the things that he does. I compared it to Kyrie Irving. That may be blasphemy. That may be the wrong thing to say. I mean, it's not the same version. Kyrie Irving to me has got the greatest grip and handles of all times in terms of creating shots from just about any place on the court once you cross half court. It's amazing, and he's an old dude that's still doing it at a high level, as evidenced by helping the Mavericks get to the NBA Finals. But to me, Boogie Fland brings some of those qualities. He's got some quick twitch. He's so cerebral in what he's doing. And sometimes some of the stuff he comes up with, like a Kyrie Irving, I'm not saying he's on that level, but it kind of reminds me of some of it. You think something's devolving or falling apart, and then you realize the way he finishes, the way he gets into his shot. Was this part of the plan, or is he so good at making up the plan as he goes? Sometimes it's a little bit mesmerizing. I don't want to get crazy about this, but this guy to me, when I watch him, I really like his craft, and he's also can be when I've looked at him percentage wise, can be efficient. He can be efficient. He'll put his head down and get all the way to the basket because he figures out angles to get the ball up and with a chance to go in, or a good chance to go in. He's got an array of floaters, change of pace, change of direction, get into a pull-up game, step back three. So he's got dribble craft in his 3 game. And so a guy like him, guys that are so talented on the ball, you want to see them progress off the ball, learning the nuances as the game escalates and what it means. You want to see him learn and understand how to play off the ball and how to move the ball. And he's a willing passer, but I would say he's a score first kind of lead guard. DJ Wagner to me can get better as a facilitator, but at the same time, he had, like I said, the stats backed up an effective rookie season, freshman season last year at Kentucky. But both of those guys to me can be interchangeable. 1, 2, it could potentially play on the court together. Boogie's got some Lee Mayberry. Lee Mayberry was not a dazzle guy. I mean, he could go out and get 30. That dazzles you. And Mayberry could finish at the rim. He could dunk the ball on folks. Kind of an underrated athlete because you had so many pieces around him. Arkansas was running wild, and he was kind of that calming force. Lee Mayberry, okay, we'll throw that in there. Similar in height and size and stature, I guess. Boogie Fland is also a clutch guy. I look back at his high school numbers last year, New York Player of the Year. I mean, Mr. Basketball, this guy, 19 points per game, but over 6.5 rebounds. He will stick his nose in there and go to the glass. I saw it in the postseason All-Star circuit between the McDonald's, Nike Hoop Summit, and then the Jordan Brand Classic. And to me, was arguably the player of the game in the McDonald's All-American game, a game that came to the wire, and he hits the game winner on a putback. Had 4 3, I think 3 or 4 threes in that game, but he's just I like him at all three levels. Defensively, he's crafty. He's going to put his nose in there on the weak side as a help defender and poach some steals. Or he's good helping trap the ball. He seems to know how to position himself well to force loose balls. I've noticed some things about him even defensively. But again, learning the nuances of playing off the ball, knowing when to set teammates up on time, on target. All those are nuances that get the speed of the game and the quality of the competition around you rises. You still have a learning curve. Some guys jump right in there and get it. Some guys it takes a while. So those are things we don't know. Some of the things when we talk about DJ Wagner, he acclimated to. I look at that assist to turnover ratio as a true freshman playing the schedule Kentucky plays before SEC play, let alone league play. There was a lot to like about what he was doing as a lead guard there and his time playing on the ball. So, Boogie Fland to me, his talent is through the roof in some ways. I see he's one of those guys that, um, similar to a Moses Moody, if there wasn't already another player with experience there, I'd say he's a day one starter. And he's going to have day one starter value. You say, well, what does that really mean? Well, not everybody, if you've got the kind of talent Calipari brings in, not everybody's going to be on the court with the first five when the ball goes up. That doesn't mean that they won't be playing heavy minutes and maybe being among the final five on the court at the end of games. He's that kind of guy. Carter Knox, who we haven't talked as much about, the 6'6 guard, is another guy that has first round NBA draft projections in a year's time, 2025. And this guy to me could be a dynamic scorer. He gives you a guy that you think, okay, maybe we can count on him to put up good numbers in concert with a Nelly Davis, and being sort of that potential six man like I talk about Boogie Fland. Carter Knox to me is another guy that could potentially bring you a six man kind of value. I think he could be versatile and play the two or the three. I want to see his handles improve a little bit before I start talking about playing any kind of ISO ball or running stretches of games or crunch parts of games with him as your lead guard or initiating things. But I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's a guy that I want to see more from in terms of improved ball handling out on the floor. But this is a guy that understands how to use his handles well enough to get into scoring angles. He's a slasher. He's got a nice post up, mid-range, mid-post game. And so he's able to catch, use a pivot, turn, and then rise over folks and knock down mid-range shots. A competent three-point shooter. Big-time numbers he put up at Overtime Elite last year. And another McDonald's All-American five-star. So I think both he and Fland have that kind of six-man spark for me when I look at them. And then we move down to the next two players on the roster, Billy Richmond and Big Z. These are depth pieces. I think Billy Richmond is a guy that don't sleep on him. I don't fully knock him out of a six-man type of possibility for a couple of reasons. One is he is at 6'6", he's strong. Carter Knox is too. Both are athletic. Billy Richmond is a fearless slasher. He gets a ton of deflections. He'll block shots in transit. He is one of those guys that I don't know what the adjustment will be from him at this level, but he might be one of those guys that immediately is one of your top defenders. And if that's the case, and you're trying to get better on that side of the ball because of what Kentucky went through last year, you can look at having so many young players and freshmen as part of your problem, but also defensively, this guy might help you raise that up a level. So I don't completely rule out, and he's a five-star. When you look at the composite rankings, top 25 guy and a five-star. And he was invited to and participated in the Jordan Brand Classic, one of those top three postseason high school all-star events that I mentioned. So this guy's no slouch. And then Big Z now, I think now that we've seen Jonas Adu, obviously to me is your day one no-brainer at the five starter. Big Z, to me, you're looking at a guy that played 11.7 minutes in 15 games last year as a freshman at Kentucky, half a season. Not a big role. I think we're going to see that role jump up. And I'm not sure that, I initially project him anywhere from 16 to 20 minutes. And depending upon how things play out with other guys and what he's able to do with some of his versatility, I think in some way, he projects better offensively than Adu in terms of not only being able to knock down some threes, but some of the other stuff he does. I think he's got some real skill around the basket when I watch him, even off offensive rebounds or when he catches the ball, he keeps it high, gets to really good angles to go off the glass or finish at the rim. He can finish lob passes. Jonas Adu does that as well. Both guys are fantastic. But I think Big Z, obviously, in this scenario that I'm giving now, is a guy that's playing off your bench and giving you options at that 5 spot. Not only there, I even wonder, will Calipari do what he's done at the Pass at Kentucky and at some point run out a Big Z, Jonas Adu, and Trevor in Brazil with it? Take your pick of any other backcourt players and wings on the court, because I'm going to get into some of these rotation ideas and have one of those big lineups like he did back in the day when Kentucky ran the table in the 2014-15 season before losing to Wisconsin, in the Final Four. But a team that went undefeated up until that point, and you had Trey Lyles at 6'10", Karl Anthony Towns at 6'11", and Willie Cauley-Stein, what was he, 7 foot, 7'1"? So that's been done before by Calipari, and not as a novelty. I mean, those guys could play. There was some versatility there. What kind of versatility? We could see that. This is why I like this roster 1 through 9. Once you added DJ Wagner to shore up your backcourt, and you added Trevor in Brazil to shore up your front court, it's not just that you got to 9, but you really have a lot of positional versatility and so many options now on how you can run things and do things. It's very interesting. And to me, all of these guys bring some kind of level, starter value levels. Big Z, I'm not fully there yet to make that as a full statement, but speaking of potential first round picks, his talent and some of the things he's already shown have already got some mock drafts with him as a potential first round pick in 2025. So it's not a stretch to say even he brings starter value. Now, if you're dealing with injuries, illness, foul trouble, you can play guys extended periods of time and be confident that you're not having a ton of drop off. So all that stuff's important. All right, we're 37 minutes in. Thank you for joining me in HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I've gone through the roster, strengths and weaknesses of guys, or coming up here, or as a team, we're going to talk about some of it. I've hit it on some of it individually, but I was just going through some of these lineup possibilities. We got a lot more to get to. We're going to go through Yukon's roster in a little bit. Foreign player overseas, foreign national that Arkansas apparently is among 4 teams that's been reported recently of being involved with. We know the Hogs didn't the perimeter player Igor Demin that landed at BYU. There's another perimeter guy with some length and could be a combo guard. And then we got 2025 and 2026 updates. Recruiting's heating up and that big time, including some in-state guys. We're going to talk about all that and get to it. It's a Saturday, man. It's a slow-moving Saturday. We're getting a little bit of rain with some sunshine here in the 501 as I look out the window here in my man cave. But I'm loving this, man. I'm loving what Calipari's done. If he's ranked 18th as a coach going into this season, I think it's way off just based on this roster. If we're just basing on this roster and those rankings are supposed to be what these coaches are ranked going into a season, are you really just factoring in recent postseasons? Okay, I guess there's some fairness to that. But going off this roster, really? Why is this not a bit of a reflection on what you're bringing into this next season? Goodness gracious. I mean, a lot of these recruiting rankings have Arkansas at the top, number 1. Some of them do. I mean, a lot of them, most of them top 5 at this point. There may be some outside of that, and I've just missed it. But the point is, you got a little bit of everything. You're not really starting over. We've talked about the continuity thing, bringing 3 players over from Kentucky. Trevor in Brazil now. You've got a Hog coming back, and they're all high-quality guys. So there's a good mix of everything, and it's not a typical Calipari loading up on a deep freshman class and hoping he can figure it out by March and make a run. We know it's harder and harder to do that. It helps explain maybe some of the shortcomings there in the last few years. So he's made adjustments. No, these aren't his first portal players, but there's a lot to like about this, including program continuity, that I think gets lost when we started this, when Calipari on introductory day 2 months ago was talking about my roster's at 0. It's not at 0 anymore. All right, so moving through, we're going to talk about how to backfill this thing with the 2 or 3 more, walk-on scholarship, what that looks like. And could Calipari sneak up on us with a really quality player for another spot, for a 10th spot? I'm not ruling that out. In fact, I think with some of these possibilities we're going to talk about, coming up here shortly, it could be in play. But when I look at the lineups now, talk about lineup versatility and we could talk rotation, 6 men and guys off the bench. But what could some of these lineups look like? I mentioned the big lineup. I mentioned that just moments ago. Adu, Big Z, Brazil, and any combo of anything else you want to put in there. But that is a really big, that's a jumbo lineup in terms of size, length, and athleticism. Not necessarily beef. You could have a traditional lineup, and I think for Calipari, the starting five that I just went through would be a traditional lineup for him. That's a more traditional starting type of five. Then you could go small, and it's not just about who starts; it's about stretches of games. You could go small. Any combo of 4 guys playing even with a Brazil you could play 5 out with that group. You hope Brazil moves the needle in some of the face-up stuff that he does, but you could play 5 out. You've got slashers galore. You've got a lot of so you could have any combo of 4 guards and wings along with Brazil and have kind of a smallest lineup. I guess you could even have 4 guards and wings along with Adu Thero at 6'8" and really have a small lineup. Maybe you could have an explosive athletic lineup with some sturdy guys in there that aren't but to me this thing's been constructed so well. It's not just about talent. There's experience. There's NCAA tournament run experience. There's continuity. To me, this was like getting the Rubik's Cube solved with the cheat code almost, because you're just kind of picking and choosing some of these high-level guys and guys that you wanted back that factored into your success at Kentucky as well. So I really like it. By the way, for the young kids out there, the Rubik's Cube, you look it up. There's probably some other game reference I could have used now. I don't know. But so the strengths to me on this team, I'm just going to run through the strengths. Positional size, positional length, positional athleticism, and talent. Experience. I've talked about it. Final 4, Elite 8. Regular season success for guys. Florida Atlantic, Tennessee, Kentucky last year. You got a bunch of players that were at the top of their leagues all last season and ranked. That stuff matters to me. Division I experience. Again, this isn't a roster loaded up with true freshmen that don't know the feeling. It's a lot of guys that have played. If you start adding up the years, now Arkansas did that last year. We're talking about a new staff, and there's really no comparing this season to last season other than EPM, Eric Patrick Melsman, went for a lot of college experience, but not a lot of those guys had a ton of success in their experiences, in their Division I experience. Tremont Mark did, but outside of that, no one else really did. When you go through that, we could go through it. We would just run through the list. Not really anybody else he brought in out of the transfer portal, and it was a portal-heavy class, had any real relative success at the level. They may have had some scoring success or had some statistical success individually. So this is a lot different. So we're going through the strengths. When I look at this roster, I go back to it. Cal's best teams, in my opinion, rebound, big plus advantages on the glass, including the offensive glass, and transition. I see this as a kind of roster that checks most of those boxes to get to those places in terms of being really strong in those areas of the game, in those aspects. But there are weaknesses. Overall skill, I still wonder a little bit about that. I need to see more from Big Z in terms of what he brings in a skill situation at the 5. You're not necessarily expecting a ton of skill at your 5, but you want some. Jonas Adu, I don't necessarily look at as the most skilled guy. What are skills? We could break that down, but when I'm talking about that, shooting, ball handling, some of the things that some 5s even can do now. So the little bit of question marks there. I think throughout there's some guys you could single out, but I think 2 of your potential better skill guys coming in terms of scoring, getting to shots, and creation are guys that aren't proven yet on the D1 level in Boogie, Fland, and Carter Knox. I think it'll be there, but it's a question mark. Is it a weakness? I don't know yet, but I think it's a question mark. Overall skill sets, could it be as good as Brazil as we know he can be? He's not been consistent enough, not aggressive enough, not assertive enough. Some of it's to do with injury. Some of it was due to the Arkansas's design under Eric Melsman on offense, some of those things. So still question marks. So I question, is it a weakness? Is overall skill a weakness? Perimeter shooting is part of that. You could say that's 1 and 1A, kind of the same thing, But perimeter shooting, I'm not convinced yet that this team has a knockdown shooter. Nelly Davis, percentage wise, over 41%. You hope guys like Adu Thero, Trevor Brazil, we'll see what kind of opportunities Big Z has and how they use him. And again, going back to Boogie Fland and Carter Knox, I think those guys are going to be competent, maybe even plus 3-point shooters when we look at it percentage wise. But I don't know that. I don't know it. So those two things are question marks. And this is less of a question mark and more of an observation as a weakness. Having some muscle and beef on your front line. I don't that's not there. If we say Adu Thero, but to me he's still a tweener, he's a 3-4. I think he can defend 5 spots because I think 1 through 3 for sure for long stretches. I think in certain matchups he could defend 4s for stretches. And I think in a pinch, in some small ball scenarios, maybe he could defend a 5. I don't know how long you could sustain that. But he's not even a traditional 4 in terms of being a body banger and being a guy that's moving people around. And, I don't know how many Kamani Johnsons are out there, but that's what I have in mind. Someone that doesn't have to necessarily be plugged in and demand the ball, be saying, I've got to have a starting role or a top 7 role, but a guy that you can turn to and backfill your roster and do like Kamani Johnson was used. If there's somebody out there like that, that's what I'm talking about. I think Arkansas might be lacking someone that can come in and change the narrative on the court with physicality and be a volume glass kind of guy and kind of set some rules out there that we're not going to be pushed around. I'm not saying these other guys are going to get pushed around. I'm saying I don't see the presence of a guy that's a banger and a guy that's going to go in there and set a tone physically necessarily on that front line. And for a program that had struggles last year defensively, I think that helps too. You got a lot of rim protection length, but I think you could use maybe a bruiser, banger, bowling ball type of guy on your front line. Big Z equals Porzingis. Whoa, pump the brakes. Porzingis has got some guard skills. I don't know, Big Z he'll make some nice passes. He does a really good job in transition when he runs down the middle of the floor or fills a lane, but especially in the middle of the floor, not only in transition, but in high ball screens where there's spacing, he does a good job of turning his hips and getting his head on a swivel as a passer and as a receiver of the ball and not playing from behind like sometimes you see bigs a step slow or a half step slow from what the guards are doing. They're in the right spot, but they're not necessarily get their head turned around or they can't get their bodies adjusted just right. And you see turnovers and offensive fouls and stuff. He does a good, he's got some agility. This guy's got special qualities, no doubt. Porzingis, let's not do that. Let's be fair. I know I did Kyrie Irving and Boogie Fland. So, okay, I'll accept it for now, but I got to see that. I got to see that play out a little bit. Porzingis, man, that game 1, by the way, that dude was the difference. Wasn't he coming off the bench? Flamethrower and was getting it. I mean, dribbling by guys, getting to the rim, knocking down 29, 30-foot threes. I mean, did he miss a shot? Missed 1 or 2 shots, maybe. 20 points, big game. 3 blocks, dude was challenging. Yeah, you'd hope Big Z could have a season like that and have games like that. And we'll see, going into it, what you love about this, I thought all of these guys that Calipari brought in are 1A and 1B type of guys. So there's not a lot of drop off necessarily 1 through 9. And when you start looking at your positions, so we went through some of the lineup possibilities, some of the strengths and weaknesses. And now we get out to filling out the final 2 or 3. Some of you may have been waiting on this because we're almost 50 minutes in. This has gone longer. I mean, I love talking about basketball, and I've done it again. But filling out the final 2 or 3, let's look at real quick Dame Sarr, a 6'6" combo guard out of Italy. Just recently, just at the end of May, on U18 FC Barcelona, playing in the Adidas Next Generation tournament in Europe. It was a European event. This guy went off 18.6 points per game, 3 rebounds, but what I like is 6 assists. He's a 6'7" combo guard, 6 assists per outing. Wasn't lights out from 3 by any stretch, 10 of 35, only 28.6%. Made 50% of his 2-point field goals, and got to the free throw line in high volume. And only shot 69% there, but 18.6 points, 6 assists. I really like this guy. I went and watched some film on him. Now, by the way, there's an I think with Made Hoops, and these guys go around watching players all over the place. But he put out a list and said, "Look, we're not sure what Dame Sarr's plans are in terms of does he leave Europe to go play college for a year." The young man just turned 18. Just turned 18 a couple of days ago. June 4th was his birthday. So just last week, young man turns 18 years old. But the idea is we don't know yet. Is he going to remain in Europe? Is he going to come and play a year of college before he's eligible for the 2025 draft? But apparently, Arkansas, Georgia Tech, and Gonzaga, and Arizona are four schools mentioned by this Made Hoops contributor. So we'll see what legitimacy is there. That's interesting to me because it continues a theme of John Calipari and his staff being interested in bringing in overseas players. I mean, we just talked about Big Z. Calipari is going to go find gems, and they may be not just hidden. I'm not saying they're hidden gems. This is a young man that's getting a lot of attention, and rightfully so. But he's going to explore it, and that means overseas. And I don't think he was bragging about getting his passport updated, other than to let us know that there's no place he's not going to go to find players and recruit. And so you would expect nothing but the best from Calipari. And now we know some of the best players even at the highest levels of the NBA now are international players. So I like Dame Sarr. I like what he would bring to the table. I do think I mentioned perimeter shooting. Looking at just those numbers from this most recent event doesn't necessarily do that, but he's versatile and he's got length and size on the perimeter. And he's a guy that could potentially help you out in some lead guard opportunities. He's also a guy that would, give you depth at the wing. I think Arkansas is pretty well loaded at the wing. So, but I think he could also, like I said, playing combination, maybe even some one. So we'll see how serious this is and where it goes. But I went through some of his numbers. I like the prospect. Yukon's roster, if Dan Hurley, who's out there talking to the Lakers, if he decides to leave, what happens next? Is Yukon ready to promote internally or has somebody they're already in pursuit of and getting close to on if a change is made? This is all happening kind of out of the blue. But look at the roster. The first name for me that makes the most sense immediately is going after Liam McNeely. It's somebody that Calipari was recruiting when he got to Arkansas, went and met with him. At that point, it was Yukon and Arkansas, maybe one or two other places that he might visit. And he ended up visiting Yukon and committing a week later. But it felt like in Arkansas, even previous staff and Calipari recruiting him at Kentucky, this is a guy that could potentially be in play. And he checks that perimeter shooter box. If you look at all levels, playing on the EYBL high school or the EYBL circuit, playing on the the biggest stages of independent high school basketball in his high school career, typically when they chart those efficiency numbers, big volume 3-point shooter, tracking 45 to 50% from three based on various stages and events that he played in. And at 6'8", there's other stuff that he has. I mean, he's a McDonald's All-American, a top-notch 5-star player. To me, that's a guy that you try to get back in play because I still think there's a need on the roster. I think there's a need to add more players, by the way. I do. I mentioned some of the weaknesses I perceive, shooting and maybe some more muscle. So I'm envisioning maybe a wing with some length to help you with that can shoot, Liam McNeely. And then muscle, that he doesn't check that box, but there might be some other options out there. But to me, he's the first one on the Yukon roster that jumps out because he wasn't part of two back-to-back national championship teams. There's not a loyalty there in terms of he's been a Husky. You look at Alex Caravan, the 6'8" forward that just dropped out of the draft to come back for a third title run, potential back-end first-round pick. I was a little bit surprised by that, honestly, but he did it. He's going to be left holding the bag, maybe. Does he stick around Yukon? I mean, he loves the program, obviously, but part of that's being part of that winning brand. I mean, are you necessarily now a national title contender, or do you follow? Do you find a way to get back? I mean, I don't know the rules with the NBA draft. I think the deadline, the NBA draft deadline, the NBA's deadline to withdraw from the draft is still upcoming in a few days. Would there be a way to get back in there? But Alex Caravan, that's a guy that anybody would love to have. I tweeted this yesterday. That's a winning lottery ticket in terms of any team getting a guy like him. Versatile guy, can shoot, big rebounder, good defender, smart basketball player. Alex Caravan. Another intriguing player, 6'2", Hassan Diarra. Big time recruit coming out of high school. It started at Texas A&M. It started out there. Played a couple of seasons with the Aggies and uh, Buzz Williams. And I remember him. He gave Arkansas fits in some games. Things didn't work out there. He spent the last 2 years at Yukon, so he's been part of back-to-back national title teams and has had a rotation role. Has had a rotation role. So it would be a fifth season for him. He came in with that 2020 class, so he's got another year. To me, that's another guy that would give you some depth in your backcourt, bring a potential defensive presence. He's got a national championship pedigree, so he's not a guy that to me is chopped liver as a potential. Another guy with experience from Yukon, playing 3 years there. Really, his junior season was his best season. A backup on that front line is Samson Johnson, guy that to me would make some sense for Arkansas as we talk about maybe another frontline piece. He would make some sense. 6'10" guy. So those are some of the names on that Yukon roster. Aiden Mahaney, the transfer from St. Mary's. A lot of people really like him. A good, 38% 3-point shooter. When you look at his 2 seasons at St. Mary's. So 6'3" guard. I don't know. Arkansas's backcourt seems to me to be pretty much set. But that's another player there. Terrace Reed Jr., recruited by the previous staff, teammates of Jordan Walsh at Link Academy. 6'10" guy, transfer from Michigan that UConn added in the offseason. Again, I don't necessarily see a fit there with him as much because I think he's going to be expecting an NIL package on top of a meaningful role beyond what maybe Arkansas is looking at now, backfilling 2 or 3. But I put his name out there, you never know. And then I think it's interesting. There's 4 sophomores, freshmen last year, that didn't do much, but they got a few little stats here and there because they got opportunities at some point, but they didn't really factor in. But you've got, to me, if you're talking about backfilling 2 or 3 guys with guys that are basically glorified walk-ons, that are going to have to earn an NIL opportunity later, some of these guys might be worth looking at in a coaching change. Jalen Stewart, a 6'7" forward. Solomon Ball, 6'3" guard. Jaden Ross, 6'7" forward. Yusuf Singer, a 6'10" center. Again, very little known about these guys, but these might be backfill type of guys. You never know. A couple of incoming freshmen, both 4 stars. One of them's top 40. The other one's top 75 or 80. Ahmad Noel, a 6'3" guard. And then Isaiah Abraham, a 6'7" combo forward. All right, so those are some of the names that jumped out at me. I went through a lot there on UConn's roster if Danny Hurley leaves. Another player, Cannon Catchings, a 6'10", top 40 rated 4-star player, just decommitted from Purdue. Had a who's list of Big Ten schools that were among his finalists when he ended up at Purdue. But what's interesting is if you made assumptions that this guy's then probably, he's an Indiana guy, Indianapolis, I believe, but decommits, and you think, well, maybe these other Big Ten schools in the area are going to be front runners. But reporting today from On3 Sports, I think it was Joe Tipton, he's got visits set up to BYU and Florida State. Could Arkansas, again, you're talking about a 6'10" freshman, 4-star guy. If you look at incoming freshmen, it was guards and wings. The 2 big men that Calipari had committed to him and signed with him, both off the board. The guys that were going to be at Kentucky, both off the board. And we know that. So would he look at, okay, I'll backfill with a 6'10" freshman, and maybe he's a 10th spot kind of guy that actually gets some NIL money. And now Calipari could say, well, I didn't fib. Things changed. This player came available. Could you get it on the radar of somebody like that? And now you've added also a depth piece on your front line. These are unknowns. Just throwing some stuff out there in terms of what's developed here a little bit. When we look at how you can do it. Now you could go back. I mentioned this. You could go back and talk portal. What's in the portal? When I looked at the top 100, the only guy that doesn't have a destination right now is Coleman Hawkins. And when I broke some of my, my source information a few segment or so ago, I think it was the last segment, or the one before, just a few days ago, was that Louisville wouldn't be the only place. We only knew of a Louisville visit at that point, but I was told that wouldn't be the only place. And then I mentioned to you guys Kansas State, potentially SMU, LSU, some other ones. I've heard Miami since then. But the Louisville trip was canceled. And now it's the next stop apparently is going to be Kansas State. So we'll see what goes on with Coleman Hawkins. But the only guy I even saw ranked in the top 100 who doesn't have a destination. And there's names, there's guys that to me, when I look at them statistically, my thought is they're going to want some kind of role beyond outside the top 9. And beyond, hey, who knows? You're coming in here as an afterthought in a sense, and maybe a piece for the future. But too many of these portal guys, it's about now. It's about now with NIL, and it's about now in terms of opportunity. Now, there'll be a reality for some that got in there, and maybe Calipari's able to poach some of those guys. But I'm not going to run deep in portal guys right now. I'm going to save that for the next one. So the next one of these I do, I'm really going to drill down on that. But I've given you some options here. Overseas, Dame Sarr, some guys off Yukon's roster, the freshman that just decommitted from Purdue, and one more that I'll get into, Will Riley. We've talked a lot about class of 2025, looking to reclass to 2024 potentially, maybe likely. 5-star guy in the 2025 class as it sits currently, but has already visited Illinois, previously visited Arizona, recently Illinois and Kentucky, talking about visits to Alabama and even Arkansas later in the month. We'll see if that happens. And I wanted to go with him last because he's another guy that brings perimeter shooting at 6'8", a lot of offensive skill, a guy that can really, really help you if he makes that transition from high school to D1 and is the moment's not too big for him and it translates, could really, really help your offense and your perimeter shooting. I mean, the guy's just very gifted. So we'll see on Will Riley. But it's a great transition for me because now I'm going to finally talk about class of 2025 recruiting as well as 2026. And then I'm going to wrap in some in-state guys with that because I think we need to. But Malik Thomas, and this is a guy I saw up close and personal, playing multiple times a few weekends ago, Memorial Day weekend, on the Nike EYBL Session 4 in Kansas City. I just love everything about Malik Thomas. 6'4", he's athletic, he's got length, he's smooth, he'll attack the rim, he'll try to dunk on you. He's got all kinds of craft, counter moves, but he's got this, I'm not going to call it arrogance, he's got this confidence. Competitive confidence that I just love in a guy that's talented like that. But it seems fearless to me, and I really like Malik Thomas. Pittsburgh area guy, 6'4" guard. And there's been reporting out that he's looking, I think it was On3 Sports, maybe, Jamie Shaw, I'm not sure which one, but reporting out that he's looking to visit Arkansas June 25th through the 27th. He speaks highly of Cal. I interviewed him. That Twitter, if you want to, search his name, and my Twitter handle @ARHoopscoop. But he's a guy that speaks fondly at Cal, and I think this is a player that, by the way, top 10 rated 5-star, top 5 rated by some services, but just a fantastic talent. And we'll see if Arkansas not only gets the visit as it's planned, but can find a way to get this guy. I love Malik Thomas. I think this to me looks like a future NBA player in a year's time. We'll see. Things don't always work out like you think. But he was one of the guys when I've looked at so many 5-stars at Cal's recruiting, interviewed several of them. All of them check the boxes you want. This guy certainly does. And remember, Arkansas's already had a 2025 visitor, another top 10, top 15-ish rated guy, Darius Acuff Jr., 6'3" guard, IMG Academy, by way of Detroit. So far when we're talking visits, one guy's been here, one guy coming up, Detroit, Pittsburgh, some of those blue collar towns. And a lot of times the athletic talent that comes from those areas, you kind of see it. And with Malik Thomas, I see that. Yeah, he's smooth and got, he can shoot the three, he can get into the mid range. He goes all the way to the rim and just a fearless competitor, doesn't back down. And I just love the guy, but I think let's keep an eye on Malik Thomas. I think it's interesting as we shift into what's happened in 2025. Obviously, when you start going down the list, the Boozer twins, Cameron and Caden, AJ DeBonsa, these are all players I interviewed that talked about an interest in visiting Arkansas. DeBonsa, the number 1 player in the country, 6'9" combo forward at prolific prep. The Boozer twins at Columbus High School in Miami is where they've been playing. Second rated one is Cameron, the 6'9", 6'8", 6'9" forward. Caden, the 6'4" guard, also a top 25 player. Just going down the list, we talked about Malik Thomas. Guy, Darius Acuff Jr. was not participating in that event at Nike because he was with Team USA at that time, and now part of that team, and doing well in competition already for that under 18 team. But Caleb Wilson, the 6'9" forward, another guy that's very much interested in Arkansas, another top 10 rated 5-star player. And you just keep and he's from the Atlanta area, but when I keep going down this list, I mean, Nate Ament on the Adidas circuit, the 6'9" combo forward that reminds me a lot of Will Riley, very polished, high IQ, 3-point shooter. Both of them kind of are in that Michael Porter Jr. modern day stretch 4 kind of guy. Or play even a 3 spot when you get to the NBA, obviously. But when I look at these guys, Amen has now moved into the top 10 in some of the rankings. He was 15 to 20. He's another guy that has expressed interest in visiting. So 2025 is loaded. I'm leaving some names out. There's so many players though in that class that it's one of the best classes I've seen at the top in a while. I've kind of over my skis with it a little bit because I need to see some of these guys when it translates to D1. But I think most of them are going to be one and done. Some of these names I've given you, not all of them, but some of them for sure. All right, in-state guys, I think it's important to understand. Again, right now I'm looking at 5. I'm looking at 5 guys that Arkansas has shown some level of interest in. There's been outreach. It's increasing a little bit. Not to the extent where offers have been made, and that may be around the corner at some point. But just most recently, class of 2026, Jacob Lanier, ranked 33rd by ESPN, high-level 4-star guy, had a really good showing at the Nike EYBL session playing with the 16U MoKan Elite. Jalen Montanati, another class of 2026 guy that's been a 5-star, is on his team on that 16U. It's loaded. That 16U MoKan Elite squad could beat some of the 17 and under teams. That's how good some of the players are. But Lanier had a good showing out there. I documented some of that. But in the most recent, the prestigious Pangos All-American Camp in Las Vegas, Malik Thomas, by the way, got most outstanding player of that just last week, just a few days ago. Most outstanding player. But he was on the same team as Jacob Lanier, who kept putting up, well, they weren't initially. Lanier kept putting up 20-plus point games out there, going up against the best players in the country on efficient shooting. And he got invited to the top 30 All-Star game. I mean, the Pangos camp typically invites 100 or more players. So if you make that top 30 All-Star game, you're among the best that perform during the week and during competitive play. It's all 5-on-5. And so in the top 30 All-Star game, Malik Thomas and Jacob Lanier were teamed up. Lanier's a 6'6" guard, combo guard out of Maumelle. And Lanier led the way, 22.6 of 8 from 3. It was named the most outstanding, the most valuable player for his team. So each team in the Pangos top 30 game, the All-Star game, each team gets a most valuable player. So there's only 2. But Jacob Lanier, and you're talking about the top players in 2025, and he's a 2026 guy. I have said all along, the last time I talked about him on HogvilleNET YouTube Live, I said this guy has 5-star qualities and 5-star stuff in him. And it's a matter of taking the next step in a few ways. The smooth shooter. I mean, this is one of those guys, and I made a player comparison. I was talking to his dad and some other basketball people, and I went old school. I like to go old school sometimes. But Allen Houston, the former Tennessee star, former NBA star with the Knicks, there's some smoothness to his 3 game and some of the think qualities he brings that remind me a little bit of Allen Houston. There's some other player comparison, maybe some Moses Moody in there in some ways. But I think Jacob Lanier, and again, here's a guy that's played on the ball at Maumelle, been a lead guard at times, and including grassroots play. I think the further we go, he projects more 2-3 for me, but we'll see. I'm not ruling out that he can't continue to project along and figure out a way to be a 1 consistently. But you love the options and the versatility there. He's a young man at 6, he's a legit 6'5", pushing 6'6". He's in that range. He's got plus arm length. That reminds me a lot of Moody, that big span. But man, he's smooth. The stroke is smooth. The craft is smooth. He's getting better defensively. He's getting stronger, and he's starting to believe that he's stronger. He's playing. If you went back and look at some of the Pangos highlights, he's not just attacking the rim in transition. He's going after dudes. That instinct, that dog, is becoming more and more prevalent. And there's a maturation with some players that you don't initially automatically see. And I'm starting to see it in him, almost like I did Jalen Williams. One of the knocks on Jalen Williams, different position, but at the same stage where people, coaches and different people were saying, he's kind of too nice, too much smiling and kind of soft. I'm like, just watch. I could see the progression. I could see that, the pup turning into a dog. And there was always enough bark there to know that if they're barking even a little bit, they're going to bark more and more. So I'm seeing that with Jacob Lanier. So I've kind of, this is a guy that right now, he's also been invited to the Elite 100 camp for Nike. And then we've got J.J. Andrews, also class of 2026. ESPN's already got him rated 13th in the country, a 5-star, right here out of Central Arkansas, another 6'6" guy, more of a small forward wing at Little Rock Christian Academy. Plays for Bradville Elite on the 16U, and it's another one of those loaded 16U teams on Nike circuit that could probably beat some of the 17 and under teams. It's how good those programs are. But Andrews put up a double-double when I saw him, the last time I saw him play, in a win for Bradville Elite 16U, 15 points, 13 rebounds. He's at MBPA Top 100 camp, started this weekend and goes through the 13th. He's there, as is Terrion Burgess, class of 2025, 6'9" combo forward out of Benton. 17 and under Arkansas Hawks on the Adidas 3SSB circuit. During the live period, the weekend before the Nike event that I went to, when Calipari was there, Bruiser Flynn on Arkansas staff was there, Burgess had a double-double in every game. Just recently performed overseas in the Adidas Euro Camp, going up against foreign international players that are 23, 24 years old. So statistically, he wasn't the same guy. He did have a 10 rebound game. He had a 10-point scoring game. He rebounded well. He always does. Offense wasn't necessarily there in that event. I mean, his teams were pretty much overwhelmed. I think they won the last of their 3 games when he scored 10 points and had 7 rebounds. But you still see all him ooze potential. National number 36, 4-star according to 247 Sports. Love Terrion Burgess. He's also an MBPA Top 100 camp this week. You've got Cortland Muldrew, who's also taking part out of Springdale. This guy has been blowing up, getting all kinds of high major offers. He just gave me his slate of upcoming stuff in June. When the circuits take a break from the spring, April and May, and they really load up again in July, what you're seeing in June is you're seeing all-star camps. Is what we're seeing play out right now. By the way, the MBPA Top 100 camp, just like Pangos All-American camp, Pangos could have NBA scouts there. So Jacob Lanier was doing all that damage in front of NBA scouts. I got lists every day of some of the teams that were there courtside watching him. Does nothing but help raise his profile. But you're going to have college coaches, the one evaluation period out early midway through the month for college coaches, D1 coaches, is MBPA Top 100 camp in Orlando. I mentioned it starts this week. It started already getting underway and runs to the 13th. But Cortland Muldrew, the 6'3" guard at Springdale, is taking part in that. Springdale Harbor, formerly played for Springdale, now at Springdale Harbor, but he's likely looking to move on. I'm going to tell you what his visit schedule looks like. He's got Ole Miss coming up. Then he's got Oak Hill Academy. He's going to go out there and visit. He's going to go to Overtime Elite and visit. And then he's going to, late in the month, he's going to take a visit to Oklahoma. So he's got offers from the 2 schools he's going to visit. That's upcoming stuff with Cortland Muldrew. Arkansas has expressed some levels of interest there. And then Isaiah Seeley from Springdale High, 6'6" guard, top 50th rated player in the 2025 class, has also gotten Arkansas interest. And he'll be performing in some of these June camp, elite camp situations. So you've got 5 players there in those 2 classes. Aiden Chronister, I've not put eyes on yet this spring and summer class of 2026 out of Rogers, a top 60 guy, 60th ranked by ESPN for that class, a 4-star, got a lot of high major offers and interest, was offered by the previous Arkansas staff. Things have got a little bit quiet on him for me. I'm going to reach out. I wish I'd have done that actually before I came on today, but he's not going to be at Rogers anymore. He's moving on to Sunrise Christian. That's where Layden Blocker played. That's a big time independent school, that competes for that national high school national championship, or is often in the running for that, making the top 8 quarterfinals more often than not. So you've got to, again, it's a state that's loaded with talent. And so looking at the in-state guys, all those names I went through outside, I don't know with Chronister, but the other names I mentioned, the other 5, there's some level of interest from Arkansas already. But again, we've gone through bringing guys on for visits, 5-star guys that have offers. As we do this, there's not an offer yet for some of these guys. At the end of the day, I think at least 4 of those are, I think all 5 are SEC caliber. There's no doubt about it. I've talked about Terrion Burgess with schools like Alabama, maybe at the top there right now, Ole Miss, some high majors outside the SEC as well. Muldrew, again, visiting Ole Miss, and Oklahoma coming up. So those are SEC schools. Sealy's also got high major. I mean, these are all SEC caliber guys. Will they be Cal kind of guys? Will they be guys that Cal pursues? We don't know. Like I said, there's initial interest. Some of it's been multiple, more than one contact or more than one exchange. So just see what plays out. But when I go to 2026 and I see what Jacob Lanier's doing right now, what JJ Andrews does, if this staff just needs some time, those guys are guys he has a little bit of time on. With the 2025 guys, not a ton of time there. So let's see what happens. Some of it might just be about timing. But I think all of those guys are SEC level guys. I mentioned Lanier. Andrews is a 5-star. Lanier's got 5-star stuff, and he's on the cusp. I say the same thing about Terrion Burgess. I say the same thing about him. There's some 5-star stuff there. Well, we've got all kinds of stuff going on in the comments. I don't even know if it pertains to anything I've talked about. So I've gone deep today. We've done a lot. We're going to wrap it up here. A lot of information. I appreciate anybody that stuck with me from start to finish, people that jumped in. Just kind of running back through it real quick. We talked about the college coaching rankings based on one opinion that was tweeted out yesterday. Calipari ranked 18th. I went through my starting 5: Nelly Davis, Jonas Adu, Trevor Brazil, Adu Thero, and DJ Wagner. 6-man possibilities in Boogie, Fland, Carter Knox. Don't roll out Billy Richmond and Big Z for that, but my first 2 names I've got for that, just initial thought on that 6-man kind of role would be Boogie, Fland, Carter Knox. I went through the different lineup possibilities: big, traditional, small. You got so many options there. And whether you go big, traditional, or small, positionally, you're still not underwhelmed or undersized. Went through some of what I perceived as strengths of the team. I think there's a lot. Some of the weaknesses, and I'm not ready to fully call them weaknesses there. I've got some question marks, but they very well may be things I've identified. How do you fill out the 2 or 3 more guys? Went through some of that. Next time I come on, I'm really going to focus on what's left in the portal today. We looked overseas. We looked at a recent decommit from Purdue, and then what happens if Yukon loses Danny Hurley to the Lakers. And then we went through what's going on with 2025 and 2026 recruiting. Just remember, the early November period for the signing for class 2025 is coming up. And so these things are going to move along quickly. That's why we're starting to see visits. But I'll say it one more time. Malik Thomas, 6'4" guard out of Pittsburgh, supposed to come in at the end of June. I really hope he does. This guy, I just like him, man. I really like his game, his personality. And to me, this would be one of those home run kind of high school signings. But that's what you'd say about any top 10 rated 5-star. I get it. There's just something about the qualities in this young man that actually stand out a little bit more for me. All right, we're almost at an hour and 20 minutes. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Please go ahead, subscribe, like, share, tell a friend, whatever. We love doing this. It's Saturday. There's no Diamond Hogs right now that I'm interfering with. And again, I want to thank everybody that spent all this time with me today. It's the longest one I've done in a while. If something breaks, something happens, we're going to come back and do a live. If that's today, it's today. If it's later, it's later, but we're not going to take too much time away from you. Plan to be back at least in a couple of days. At the longest, I like to wait now. But one more time, until I see you the next time, thank you for joining us.